Hey, everybody, welcome to a very special episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy, and this is episode 350, which is wild to me. Um, so I did something special for this episode, and I sort of did a call out for like a sweepstakes, which felt like the audacity of the ego of this woman, right? Anyway, I did like a sweepstakes, and I said, if you want to take a chance at being a guest co-host for the 350th episode, send me a quote you'd like to start with. So, with me today are Gemma Medina. Hi, Gemma.
Hi.
And Valley Varma. Hi, Valley.
Hi.
Sharing their sweepstakes wins.
Woohoo.
Package deal.
Yeah, and what I love about this story, one, I mean we've chatted before. Gemma, I think I interviewed you
Yeah,
at the
that's
very
right. Yep.
beginning of my schema book stage.
hmm
Um, uh, so when I emailed Gemma, I think you did the submission, right, with the quote
Yeah.
idea, and I emailed you that wanted it to be you, and I think at the time you were like in my Cubers session at NACY, is that right?
Right. So we
I thought
actually
it was
went to
so
NACY
funny.
and Valley and I were together and I told her, I was like, oh, I ended up submitting like last minute.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I'm going to email Heather right now and see if I'm the chosen one that you can come to. So then the whole of NACY, we were going, do you think she emailed? Let's check. Let's check the email. We were in my Cuber session when you actually sent the email. And we were both like, oh my God.
That's so funny. Yeah. And so then he's texting me and it was a whole thing. It was really fun.
I think
Would
you
you
took a
eat?
picture with him to celebrate. You
You
took a
did?
selfie with him. Yeah, I have to look for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Pretty
we'll put that in
confident.
the show notes or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I'm so jealous you got to go hang out with Mike in person.
it's a great session.
Anyway, would you
Yeah.
each tell folks a little bit about yourself? Gemma, I'll ask you to go first just so you two don't have to fight about it.
Okay, yeah, my name's Gemma Medina. I have been in the early childhood field like my whole adult life, about 27 years teaching. I now
Mhm.
teach at the University of Hawaii, Maui College, and I've been there for about 5 years as a full-time instructor. I actually submitted my tenure document this semester, so
Woohoo.
fingers crossed for that. I'm also a mom, so I'm a new mom. I have a toddler, so that's kind of changed my whole perspective on everything, and also validated a lot of what I already thought I knew. And Valley and I have been friends for many years. We worked at UH Manoa Children's Center together, and now we continue our friendship. And it started out as a professional friendship, but now we're good friends and happen to live on different islands. But yeah.
Yeah, the best. Thank you. All right, Valley.
Hey, I am a similar story in that I've been in the field for about 30 years as well. I am a teacher of 2-year-olds at the University of Hawaii Children's Center, and I also teach classes at the Honolulu Community College. Also, I co-teach a class or two with Gemma in Maui virtually, so I'm just exploring that adult learner
Mhm.
relationship and style, finding my style and finding my way with that. But I've been
Yeah.
working with children for a long time.
Yeah, great. So we've all been doing it about the same amount of time, right? I think
Yeah.
almost 30 years, a little more than 30 for me.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in because as I always do, I get caught up in the chit chat at the beginning. But let's get going because it's the end of Friday at my house, but it's the middle of the workday on Friday for you too. So,
Right.
the quote that you sent, and I heard this one before, and I love it so much. Um, it's from a poem called Wild Child by Jeanne Willis or Jeanne Willis. I'm not sure how she would pronounce it. But she writes, they caught all the wild children and put them in zoos. They made them do sums and wear sensible shoes. They put them to bed at the wrong time of day and made them sit still when they wanted to play. That sucks.
Right.
Why this one, Gemma? You sent this in.
I
And
did.
you can both speak to it, but I'm going to let you start again.
So I remember coming across this quote some years ago, and just it really struck me, and I had a lump in my throat when I first read it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm so glad that you read the quote because if I feel like whenever I read it, I cry.
Yeah.
And it comes from a children's book, so it's a longer
Oh, okay.
poem. about children and a wild child that's alone in nature. And I think that connects with me because I spent a lot of time alone in nature as a kid. I grew up in England and I loved being outdoors in the forest. And so that's partially why this speaks to me. But I think this quote in particular, it just makes me think about how children have become almost a commodity, and that we're just like buying all these assessment tools and curriculums, and let's see how this works and let's see how that works. And it's just taken this humanness out of early childhood. And they caught all the children and put them in zoos just makes me think about, you know, all the kids being in these programs that are just observing and documenting and quantifying and, you know, teaching and training. And what do we get? We get children that conform. And is that really what we want? So I think that's where this really speaks to me.
Yeah. How about you, Valley?
You know, the first time I heard this poem was from Gemma, and I think you had found the book that you had lost or came back around, and you were so excited to share it with me. And I could tell it had such a major impact on you. And I think you knew I would relate to it because I also had a very wild childhood. Without getting too deep into my story, my parents were major hippies. I grew up in this valley 11 miles away from civilization until I was like 2 years old. So like that wild spirit is definitely a part of my upbringing, and I don't see it with children. Even my own child, who's now 22, you know, we tried our best to keep things open and wild and free, but it's different. It's just so different now. But yeah, it's I love this poem too because I work with infants and toddlers, and at that sweet spot, you see so much intuition and wisdom in children, knowing what they need, who they are, who they're becoming. I think this poem really illustrates how that gets washed out by some places, institutionalized care, so to speak. So I really appreciate that about this poem.
Well, I think those second two lines too really speak to that infants and toddler, like putting them to bed at the wrong time of day, making them sit still when they want to play. It's like all these impositions that we put onto children that are not really where they're at. You know, they're not following who they are or allowing them to be who they are, and trying to put them all down at noon because it's nap time, or telling them they need to come to circle time because I need to read a story and you need to learn this song is not, you know, not doing any justice to their freedom.
Yeah, I was just telling my husband, who is a newer husband, so not the father of the child the story is about, but anyway, I was just telling him about when my youngest was 3 and they didn't nap. You know, Josie just didn't nap, and or if they were sleepy, they needed to be like on their tummy but with butt in the air and twisting their legs in this weird wiggly way. And I was next door in my 2-year-old classroom as the teacher, and I could hear that they had taken like Josie's Molly doll that they slept with away, and because they wouldn't be still and it was nap time. And so it blows. I think people who aren't in that system all the time, it just blows their mind to learn that stuff. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if they're tired, we just put them down because it's time, and they have to be still, and they have to do this and they have to do that. And it's heartbreaking that so many like people with really good intentions come to work with children and then fall into this system and don't fight against it. Or don't think they can, for whatever reason, they participate in it rather than being like, what?
I mean, I entered the field when I was about 19 or 20. And I remember one of the first programs that I worked in, there was a little girl, your story just reminded me, and her legs were up in the air at nap time. And I thought nothing of it. And one of the teachers like scolded her from across the room, like, put your legs down, it's nap time, turn over. I was like,
her legs.
But that's how she wants to go to sleep. I don't understand what is wrong about that. It was confusing for me in the beginning that people responded that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, like people will walk through your classroom and everyone's asleep at the same time, and they're like, "Wow, you have such a good group this year."
Yes.
You know, it's it's such an interesting perspective, right? There should be some challenge at nap time. There should be somebody awake and just chilling out and relaxing. Like that's a normal rhythm in a room
Right.
full of individual people. So yeah, we put a lot
Right.
of
I
pressure.
I don't want to spend the whole time talking about nap time, but I can hear people's brains whirling and saying, but that's when we get our lunch breaks and we need them to sleep. And I understand the whys.
Yeah.
But I also have experienced and seen and maybe done. I've been doing it a long time. The kinds of inhumanities that we participate in because we feel the pressure of those other goals. And I think, uh, Gemma, what you said at the beginning, because the first couple lines or the first line is they caught all the wild children and put them in zoos. Of course, when I read this, I have that metaphorical, like, oh, that's so horrible. And then you said we contain them in these classrooms and we sit back and we observe and we assess. And I was like, oh wait, no, it's actually literally physically putting them in a zoo
Right.
for my consumption
Right.
as a consumer. And that's a whole different way of thinking about the dehumanizing system that we get swept up in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really challenging for me as an instructor, right, of future early childhood teachers,
Yeah.
educators, whatever, people who are going to be with children. And that how do you balance that? These are assessment tools. This is how we observe children, and without objectifying them, right? We're like, do objective observations, but don't objectify the child. It's really confusing.
But not too objective.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, there's long pauses in this. I'm noticing that, but it's just because I don't want to talk over both of you, and I just wanted to make sure I paused before I jumped in for the next thing. But I do think I want to go back to both of you sharing memories of your kind of wild childhoods because that's so relatable. I grew up on well, my first 9-ish years were in town, but in a town of 1,200 people in rural Nebraska in the middle of the United States. And then the rest of my childhood after that was on a farm, so sort of isolated, very feral, and playing with what I found and lots of it was all outside, it was nature, it was very wild. And I wonder, because one of the things I try to do, whether it's a workshop I'm doing or the class that I'm teaching, um, is to have those adults who are getting ready to work with children share their play stories, and it's missing, right? There isn't as much of that just
Right.
kind of memory of these kinds of free experiences we're talking about, and I wonder how much that contributes to us not questioning putting children
Yeah.
in zoos.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point. I really feel that the students that we have now, and I'm not sure how old your students are, but mine are about, from
I have a
18.
range.
Yeah.
Some of
Um,
them are, late 20s working with and have been working with kids for a
Right.
long time, and some are
yeah.
younger. Yeah.
So the younger students, they grew up in the time of No Child Left Behind, right? That's when they came to preschool, was during that time period. And I think that's when there was this huge push down in curriculum, huge academic push down. And so they didn't even get to play in preschool.
Yeah.
Here we are saying, what are your play memories? And you have to teach children through play. It's the best vehicle for learning. And they don't know what true play is because they didn't
Right.
necessarily have those experiences that you and I and Valley and other people can draw from. So there is somewhat of this play deprivation in our college students, I think,
Yeah.
that does lead to a misunderstanding or not understanding.
Yeah.
Right. We were chatting earlier, Heather, about student teachers. So at the University Children's Center where I work, we have interns, of course, that are going into the profession, but then we also have students just hired at the university. Some of them have worked with children before, some of them never will again, and everywhere in between. But there's a percentage of them that have this instinctual, intuitive play with children. And I remember when I first started teaching, I had that too. very strong. Like I was
Mhm.
always jumping into play for better or worse, be
Right.
it that I was invited or not into that. You know. And now I've been doing this for so long, my approach to that is very, very different. I have to be invited, right?
Mhm.
And it also, sometimes I'll have an objective, maybe like just sitting down and playing is so much rarer than it was when I first started. And I wonder, is that a direct connection to those students? They had that play in their life recently, right? And
Mhm.
like, it's just an interesting thing to notice, just that intuitive urge when you're with children to be playful.
Mhm.
I don't see it often enough now. And I
Yeah.
feel like when I first started teaching, that was kind of everybody's way.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
So we learned to be more thoughtful and more maybe look before you leap with children's play, to interrupt it, not to interrupt it. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just an interesting observation.
Yeah. I had a wonder, but it went away. So
Uh,
I have to wait for it to come back to me now.
yeah,
Yeah, I think play has just changed so much for children today. There's so much fear in parents about allowing children the freedom that we maybe had.
Mhm.
I know you're talking about being a feral child. And I was out there on my own without adults, like walking to the
yeah,
forest or, and going far away from my house. And
Mhm. Mhm.
and that sort of far away from the house aspect of it is completely gone, really.
Right.
I mean, you do not see children, or I certainly don't see it here, children wandering around on their own.
Yeah.
Um,
right.
and not that I'm condoning children wandering around on their own, because it is a little different, but I just think that there's some play stories that we have that are not commonplace anymore. And I
Yeah.
wonder how we can then help students sort of recapture those or re-find play in an authentic way in our
Right.
classrooms as adults.
Right. And there's just so much pressure. Um, that even those who have that playful disposition maybe feel like they need to kind of sneak around with it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder because, Valley, you said that some of those students have never worked with children before and may never again.
Right,
And so I
right.
wonder if there's a noticeable difference between those who are working with children with the idea of being a teacher and
Right.
those who are working with children with the idea of being with children. Like if it's a label or a goal that the adult has that makes it different sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when I get interns that are there for the purpose of practicum hours and learning from a more seasoned person, they have this agenda and this maybe like blown up sense of I'm a professional in this
Hmm.
space.
Hmm.
That maybe they don't trust that instinct as much in the
Yeah.
beginning. Whereas I think the students that are just there for a part-time job, whether they're going to school for an architecture degree or
Hmm.
whatever, they aren't thinking about that, right? They're
Right.
just being who they are with this group of humans, right? I
Right.
do feel like there is a difference. And
Uh-huh.
hopefully, after some time spent together building my relationship with that student, they will let it go a little bit and
Hmm.
be more authentically who they are. They'll trust that that is allowed in this space and
Uh-huh.
definitely encouraged in this space. But
Yeah.
yeah, there is a difference.
Yeah, I'm thinking about when I was a child care center director and hiring, people to come in and work.
Yeah,
And Indiana is one of, I think we're not rare in this, but in Indiana, you don't have to have any qualifications to come and work in an early childhood program, depending on your role and what kind of center you're identified in and what your registration, there's all these things.
sure.
Um, uh, to be a lead teacher in a NACE accredited center, which we were, you had to have an associate's degree, right?
Yeah,
But I know that I got to a point where I was more interested in hiring the ones who didn't already have a degree. And as a
Mhm.
college teacher now, this feels really weird to say, but
Sure.
but then get them into it. Like there's still
Yeah,
expertise they need and development to study and things to think about and be mentored and guided. But if they come in with that disposition to be playful and to build relationships, it was
yeah,
so much easier to get them kind of on board with the way I saw things, thought things should happen. And it was the ones who came in with that really strong need to be seen as a teacher that was
yeah.
harder for me to work with.
Right. There's more of a wall sometimes at
Yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
I'm mentally going through all the teachers I worked with who might be listening now to see if there's anyone I just offended, but I think we're all
right.
okay.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I had a student this semester, and it totally makes me think of her. She was a wonderful student, and she was doing her practicum with me. So they have to do hours at we have an on-site Head Start. And so I'm the practicum teacher, so I spend time in the classroom with them. And when she was not being observed, when it wasn't an official observation by me, you know, writing down notes and things, she was amazing, playing with the children. She came up with games with them. She allowed them a lot of space and freedom. She loved being outside with them. And when it came to me observing her, it was very different. You know, she had this teacher ease sort of voice that she would use. And it was just, yeah, it was very interesting. Like,
Yeah.
I ended up telling her, just be yourself, because that is what the children are drawn to. You don't have
Right.
to pretend to be teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
It's a loaded word, teacher,
Yeah.
I think, for lots of ways. And yeah, I think maybe that's one of the things that removes us from the humanity that's come up a couple of times in the conversation and keeps
Mhm.
us from letting them be the wild child, letting the children be that wild child that you know, we're so in love with in this poem.
Right.
Yeah, I've always struggled a bit with teacher as a term for myself.
I
Never
complain
quite.
about it, but then I use it. Like,
Yeah, right. It depends
yeah.
on who I'm talking to. Like you
Mhm.
might want to throw it in for a certain audience and not for another
Right.
audience. But really, if I'm just being my true self, it's not a word I've ever connected with. I didn't even play school and teacher as a
Mhm.
kid. I don't
Mhm.
remember that being part of my repertoire of ideas, you know.
Yeah.
So I just, you know, it's an interesting thing. I've always really, and you've been talking a lot about this in other episodes, but really been drawn to care and
Yeah.
caregiving, you know, from the very beginning. And I didn't use that for so
Mhm.
many reasons, right? And usually that was me creating this image, right?
Yeah.
So it's just such an interesting process. Yeah, but teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I really was drawn to be thinking of myself as being a teacher.
Yeah.
I played teacher a lot when I was a child. I have
Yeah.
lots of conversations, and I've probably said this before, with people who say things like, it's just my calling. Ever since I was a child, I played school, and so I knew I was called to be a teacher. And now I'm at a point where I want to say, were you, or did you just really like pretending, and school is the
Right.
familiar context you had to do
Yeah.
pretending, or you just really needed to practice with your power, and a teacher was a powerful position to practice with? So was it a calling, or was it just cool dramatic
Uh,
play? Like, I
right.
think
You're
we
on
have to
something.
distinguish that, but I definitely loved that teacher label early on. I had a lesson plan book. Like, it was kind of the accoutrements of being a teacher that appealed to me in the beginning. And then the children changed me. But I guess we're two sides of the coin in this. We'll let Gemma say what hers was, what she thinks.
Yeah, I think I was kind of in the middle, to be honest. You know,
Oh, perfect.
I loved pretend play. And so
Uh-huh.
I definitely did play teacher, but it was never a goal of mine to become a teacher. I
Yeah.
just fell into it because I loved kids.
Yeah.
So I've always loved, you know, my friends' younger siblings were who I wanted to play with when I went to their house. Like, I've
Yeah.
always liked younger children and babies. And so I think I fell into teaching because of I loved kids and being around
Yeah.
children.
Which is important, right? We have to
Right.
have that. We have to have that in there.
But I did
Yeah.
play teacher. I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. All right. Well, you balance it out then.
Yeah.
You bring us back to the middle.
I love origin stories.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, originally I felt called to be a teacher because of my pretend play, but it was a high school English teacher that I was going to be, and I was going to return to my hometown and do the English. It's just so funny to think
Yeah.
about the paths that we take to get to where we
Yeah.
are.
Oh, I was going to be a Broadway star. That was it.
Oh,
And then, oh, kids
nice.
are interesting. They're really fascinating.
And you get to sing
I
and
can
dance
sing here,
All day. Yeah, that's great. Sharp
singing
left.
and pretending. You
Yeah.
are a Broadway star, just not on Broadway. I'm rereading, sorry, some of the things that you said in the email. Um, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, and just this is you, Gemma. You wrote, I'm a huge believer that all children deserve relationship-based, play-based, place-based, nature-rich, inclusive environments to be themselves and thrive.
Yeah, that's a lot of based things.
Yeah, pick one.
Um, all right. Well, what is calling to me right now is the
Uh-huh.
place-based.
Yeah.
So that I think for us, especially here in Hawaii, is very important that children connect with where we are. And
Uh-huh.
place really encompasses relationships and nature, and all of those things. So I think all of those can be included in the term place-based. Relationships, play, being inclusive. So in Hawaii, our culture, the culture here, not my culture, but the Hawaiian culture is very strong. And I think that connecting children at a young age to that through the language, through the stories, is really important. And doing it in an outdoor, natural environment is really important for me too. So yeah, so place-based is a big part of who I am as an educator, even with my adult students. So we have a new class that I co-created last semester with a Hawaiian studies teacher, where we actually get to take our adult students on field trips to culturally relevant places.
Oh, wow.
And I teach 1 week about the ways that you can interact with children in the space, and then she teaches about the cultural significance and importance of the space, and then we take the students there. And so that has really given us this, and the students are mostly early childhood students that are going to be with children at some point. And so it's allowing them to do meaningful field trips rather than like, hey, let's all go to the fire station, or, same old stuff. So yeah, the place-based one. And I'm really excited because we're going to be teaching that this semester. And so that's kind of top of mind for me right now.
Yeah. You want to chime in on any of them, Valley?
I do. I'm so proud of Gemma and this class that has been created because, and Gemma has already said this, but just to add a little bit to it, like the place-based pedagogy here in Hawaii is important not only to Kanaka, people who are native Hawaiian, right? But also to people who are in this space, right? Who are learning and planning to live in this space. So like to combine those two fields of study is just so brilliant and so intentional. And when I think about terms of play in college classrooms, taking these students to these places and just exploring, like that's adult play to me. I mean, that's definitely I choose to do when I'm feeling playful is hike or go to the beach, or like that's one of the things. So I think it's just such an authentic way to connect these adult learners to play. You can do it in the classroom when you're teaching courses. You can create these experiences, but this can be authentically a student's own experience. And I think it's a very powerful course. Super proud of you, Gemma.
Thanks, Valley. Yeah, and it really speaks to that relationship based too. Like the students that have taken this course, they are much closer to each other than I am classes, because we have these adventures together. So yeah, it's definitely kind of bringing all of those things together in the work that I'm doing now. Because I've had all of these things in my previous life as a person who works with children. I was a center director and an inclusive preschool program, and other roles that I've played. So this is kind of my play, right? It's creating this course. So yeah,
that sounds cool. I am getting to create a course too, and it's really fun to think about how you can really, I don't know, so I'm in a statewide system of community colleges, and some things we do the same, and some things we have, you do according to campus, and there's not enough play included, and there's definitely not enough movement kind of focus, or even just teaching or thinking about how important movement and being outside is for children. And so I just get to make up a new elective called play and movement in early childhood, and it's going to have, really heavily focus on that. And it's just really exciting, right? To think not only am I doing what I love to do, I get to share all of this stuff with like a whole new group who maybe like me haven't heard about this before, and are going to have this exciting moment of learning about, oh my God, crawling up the slide impacts literacy. Oh my God.
Right.
Totally
or
agree.
being outside impacts vision development, and that impacts like all this stuff
Everything.
that we have
Yeah.
neglected so uh uh criminally in early childhood, to be able to have these moments where we can bring it back for people, or introduce it as a new thing for people. Feels cool,
Yeah.
feels fun.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, what else do I want to ask you? Hold on, let me check again.
Okay.
Um, I think I wanted, and this is going way back to the beginning again, but the word commodity has come up a couple of times too in relation to this quote about wild children and putting them in cages and making them sit still. So I wanted to just invite you to talk about what that means for you, or what for someone who maybe doesn't use that word or has never thought about it before, or
I
feels
think,
like we're being too harsh.
yeah, well, I feel like, it just, there's so many ways that childhood has been commercialized, right? There's so
Hmm.
many ways. And from the toys they play with, to the clothing that they wear, to the, everyone has to do a Disneyland trip at some point in their childhood, like all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And now it's really crept into that early childhood settings, where now it's like, well, we need to have this boxed curriculum, and they need to be
Hmm.
learning this social emotional tool. They need to have these flashcards to learn about their feelings.
Hmm.
And so I
Right.
think that is where, and those are all costly
Yeah.
programs that early childhood settings feel that they need in order to have this quality early
Hmm.
childhood or early care and education setting.
Hmm.
um but really the children are the ones that are suffering. Like, they're not being taught about feelings by having conflict. They're being taught about feelings by looking at flashcards. They're not
Right.
being allowed to look at the coconut trees growing outside, because this week is apple trees and that's what we have to focus on in our boxed curriculum unit. So I
Hmm.
think that it's just at the expense of children that we are using these expensive
Hmm.
curriculum tools.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and that cookie cutter industrialized approach where everything is kind of the same and everyone's doing the same thing so that we can produce good citizens and workers of the world. I mean, it's such an
Ugh,
extreme
yes.
thought, and it's not all leaning in that direction, but so much of it is. And I think,
Hmm.
we're taking away and undermining our true human way of progressing through life with
Hmm.
joy and passion. And I think uh we need to stop doing that. We need
Yeah.
to notice when we are creating this output of people that are not being who they truly are, right?
Hmm.
Such a it's such a critical period of life in early childhood to really, trust those things about yourself, and it's not even a
Right.
process, but I think we're undermining it often for so many reasons, and one of them
Right.
is that idea of childhood as a commodity or consumer childhood. It's just
Yeah. I was thinking about this as I was writing this morning. I was writing about mental health and early childhood and how play, how it all fits in.
yeah,
And it's a buzzword right now, as it we should be concerned about young children's mental health. It is something that we can impact negatively or positively. But I was thinking about how it's become just a way to sell
Yeah,
um, books and kits and workshops and webinars and certifications and all those things. When in practice, we're probably like, if we're expecting, what the example would I want to use? If we're expecting a whole group of children, 3 or 4 years old, to sit together in a group and listen to a story about feelings, and then have some kind of flashcard quiz, or even if it's a playful game or song or something about
right.
emotions and feelings, and some children are not able to do the sitting or the participating or whatever, they're being told, get out of the group. You're inconvenient. Go sit over there, in the
Exactly
calming
right.
corner that we also have for mental health. All these
Yeah,
the real life practices are doing damage that we're not willing to examine.
yeah.
right.
But we bought this kit so we can say that we're,
Right, we
concerned.
can check that box off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so hard. And the people in the classroom don't always have that. They're not the ones who always made the decision, so we have to figure out how to live in that system
Yes, right. And
until we
that's the
overthrow the
part of it.
system.
Right.
What, Valley?
I was just thinking that's such a big part of it too, is so many people might feel very differently or know
Mhm.
intuitively, how they want to be with children. But like you
Yeah.
said, there are people in charge of them, right? They're
Mhm.
they're in Zoom also. Those,
Mhm.
those practitioners
Right.
are also being told how to be and when to
Right.
sleep and when to play. And
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
it's just so
Yeah.
incredibly
Yeah.
disconnected sometimes from what children really need or want, or what we need and want. So
Yes.
it's,
We'd all be happier, right? We'd all just feel better about things and
yeah.
be able to experience all that naturally. And um, I don't know, it sounds pretty wonderful to me to just
You
go
know,
back
I
to feral.
I think there are so many words that have been hijacked
Yeah.
in our field, right?
Yeah.
So many. I think about like loose parts, and
Hmm.
now they're selling kits of loose parts,
Yeah,
and
I
things of play and playful learning
know.
have
Yep.
been added to lots of like
Yep.
curriculum or process versus product.
Brain
And
development has been commodified,
it's
like neuroscience
so
has been.
many
Yeah.
terms, so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
terms have been kind of hijacked and lost the true original intent
Yeah.
and meaning behind the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't, I think, I mean, that's one of the reasons I like to do this show and have these conversations is because so many people will say, I don't feel so alone now. Like I thought I was the only one who felt this disconnect. And then I, heard so and so on your show or and I hope that's maybe what is happening here with you too is folks will say, "Oh yeah, there's two more people who are on on my side or that I can hold up as examples." And
Yes.
I just think that's really cool. Okay, so was there anything that the two of you really wanted to talk about or that we haven't gotten to?
I mean, there was something I thought of when I was reading the whole poem, which we haven't
I'm gonna
read.
have to go check it out. Yeah.
I know there's a second part to this poem, which is kind of the same vein. Would you like me to read it?
Sure.
You better
Okay.
read it because if
So,
I read it, I'll cry.
Yeah.
okay. So the
We'll
second
both
part,
cry, but you read.
yeah, it's and it's really, to me, there's like this pivot that I might be overthinking, but I don't know. I tend
Okay.
to overthink, and that's fun too.
Yeah.
But so we read up to it. We make them sit still when they wanted to play. And then
Yeah.
from there, it says they scrubbed them with soap and made them eat peas. They made them behave and say pardon and please. They took all their wisdom and wildness away. That's why there are none in the forest today. Which is just,
That's like the
right?
first time I heard the 100 languages of children poem and they got to that, but they steal 99 line. And I was like, oh, that's
Right.
exactly the feeling I just had in my gut while you read that.
It's
Yeah.
so incredible. But what it makes me think of is, so we have this institutionalized approach that we may be trying to move away from in some places, but it's still kind of what's
Hmm.
happening overall
Hmm.
in school systems everywhere, right? Not just early childhood, but
Right.
across the board. It takes a intentional fight to make it any different, for
Mhm.
real. But so they caught all these children and made them do things all this one way. And then it kind of pivots to things like scrub them with soap. Well, self-care, right? Taking care of yourself,
Mm.
eating healthy. I mean, made them eat peas has such a
Yeah.
negative context, but really it's eating healthy and
Yeah. Okay.
having kindness and respect for humanity, right? I mean, maybe manners is an extreme version of that, but I just feel like in this poem, there's this flip to where we make children resist so much
Uh-huh.
by creating this context of how they must learn and be in this place, that when it comes to things that are actually maybe kind of good for their soul and good for their well-being, they resist that too.
Oh,
And I don't know.
sure.
That's what I
No,
mean
I
by
I that's not where I went, but that is so interesting. No, I
right.
I love that twist
Like
on
that
it. Yeah.
active resistance that children have
Hmm.
to being told, well, we're going to micromanage everything you
Hmm.
do, even what you
Creative.
eat, when you sleep. So even these
Hmm.
things that are good for you that we're trying to help you with, right? We're trying to teach you how to take care of yourself, but really they're very resistant now because we took
Right.
away all the freedom. So how are they going to
Right.
trust?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's my intense
Oh, yeah.
overthinking thought.
I love it. I'm sort of lost in it. Yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
that's
I
pretty
tend to
cool.
do that, Heather. Sorry. Jim was like, Sally, where she goes.
Perfect. That works perfectly. And I
Yeah.
think it brings us to a nice closing
Mhm.
point here.
I do.
I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad you guys are here
Yeah,
and
thanks
talking
for
with me
having us.
today. Yeah. So yeah, thanks again for the email and for coming on.
Thank
And
you.
thanks everybody else.
Congratulations, 350
Oh
episodes.
yeah.
Yes.
It
Bravo.
really, I mean, it's 8 years. It's a
Yeah.
little over 8 years that it just seems like yesterday that I started. Just seems like yesterday when Tiffany Pearsall and I were recording together, and
Oh, I love it.
at the end of it, I realized I didn't really hit record, and fortunately, she had done a backup recording,
That's great.
and it just sort of set the tone for everything.
I love that. Your show
Um,
is really a critical component of my work these days. Like
aw,
I've been listening to these episodes, regularly for the last probably year and a half.
uh-huh.
I really appreciate you and all the conversations you have. Like
Well,
you
thank
said, it
you.
makes me
I like
feel
to do
like
this.
I can connect with people
Yeah,
all over the country and not just
yeah,
in my sphere. If I
yeah.
need someone.
Yeah, I love it. I always joke that I started the show just to trick people into talking to me about things I was reading, but it really has brought so many just amazing people into my life that I'm just really grateful to be doing it. But I don't want to keep going on this line of conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for having
But thank you. That was very kind of you. And thanks
me.
everybody for listening to 350 episodes of That Early Childhood Nerd. We'll see you next week.